welcome to the DTC Hotline. This is your direct connection to hot takes, cold truths, and real ecom advice from two of the best in the business. Call or text 866-DTC-2263. Get your burning ecom questions answered. That's 866-382-2263. Leave us a voicemail or just send us a text asking whatever is on your mind DTC-wise. Both of our operators are standing by. And speaking of which, let's introduce them right now. We got coming to you live from CTC Studios for the first time here. We're in Costa Mesa, California. We got Tony Chopp, the Chopper, who's our VP of paid media here at Common Thread. Tony, what's going on today, man?
Hello, Richard. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't said too many I haven't said the hot take that's gotten me kicked off yet.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't booted you yet. But you're on notice. We'll see what happens this week. Next in, we got CTC's VP of e-commerce strategy here, Mr. Luke, the Weatherman Austin. Luke, tell us what's going on today.
Tony and I just look forward to this every week. This is a highlight of our week, being able to, we have conversations throughout the day in the office about what we're seeing across our data set of brands, our customers, and being able to try to package those up and share them with the world in some way that hopefully a nugget here or there is useful is just a highlight. So we're excited.
That's right. And we all get to wear our vacation shirts, of course, which means the closest thing to a break that we get, So,
exactly.
All right, let's jump into it. Just a couple notes about how this works. It's fairly straightforward. We get questions from listeners. We get questions from members of our admission community here at Commentary Collective. We bring them to these two guys. They answer them for you, bringing, of course, their hottest takes and laying down the coldest truths, which is, I think, how we're framing it right now. So let's jump to the first one here. This is a question that we get from smaller brands from time to time, and maybe you even get from larger brands too, I don't know, which is, this is how this specific thing was phrased, should we be moving away from ASC based on the way that Meta overspends on the wrong age bracket? Now, to give you more context here, the issue, moving away from ASC at this point, I don't know if that's really a thing, but the issue here is that Meta's algorithm, kind of our general philosophy here is you let the algorithm do the work. You set it up properly on the front end with your cost controls, blah, blah, blah. The algorithm will get you the result that you want it to get, and it can't really make mistakes. So in this particular situation, what it seems like what was happening is that Meta was driving a bunch of traffic, but it was driving people from quote unquote the wrong age bracket. And then this also connects to similar questions around Meta appears to be, everything's set up right, but appears to be overspending on an ad that's not really performing. So maybe the hot take framing of this question is, what do you do when Meta gets it wrong? So who wants to jump in?
Happens all the time.
Well, that is a hot take, Tony.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing when you're talking about that age stuff, like, we got bid multipliers, which is a feature that they released about a year ago that lets us put pressure upwards or downwards on audiences or gender or age ranges. So I'm not opposed to that stuff. I think the thing, okay, hot take,
right.
The sort of like dogmatic, like all or nothing sort of thing, it's just not real. It's not real. Like, Meta works 100% of the time. Like, set your cost cap and never touch it. Like, no, of course not. So the idea of like, okay, I understand something about my audience, or I'm trying to push into a certain audience or certain age range, and I want to let Meta optimize, use the algorithm to optimize, but I want to put some pressure. I want to put a thumb on the scale. Throw in some bid modifiers for sure. Plus up the age range that you think is right. Plus, minus down the age range that you don't want. I guess, like, prepared to have all of your preconceived notions challenged about what is the right or wrong audience for your product.
Right. Yeah. So that was one potential takeaway, was that actually maybe this other age bracket is the one that actually likes your product, or that it's best suited for, or something. But so you, Luke.
Yeah, I think our foundational belief is that Meta has infinitely more signal than any one of us do. And so it's based on that understanding that we try to orient our behavior around. And one example of that is the curve of none of us really know what the curve of degradation looks like on any individual campaign within any of the platforms. You can access this in Google for most of your campaigns and sort of start to see at different spend levels what the projected CPA or the projected conversion value is going to be and sort of model this out on a campaign specific level. Meta will give you it sometimes on certain types of campaigns. But what you see when you start to look at that is the range of outcomes is way wider than we could possibly imagine. And we just had a conversation and are doing an offer around our spend MER models, which is modeling the same thing. The degradation of efficiency is wildly very varied outcomes across different brands and even on the campaign level. We look at one campaign for brand A and then the second campaign for brand A, and there's a really different degradation of the efficiency curve between just those two campaigns. And you start to do that on a brand level. And so I think it's really hard for us to know what that looks like to be able to base our behavior upon to say, where is the next best dollar spent? An indication of over the past 7 days or the past 14 days, the female 25 to 34 bracket is underperforming male 35 to 44 is no indication of what the curve of degradation in the future looks like and the volume available based on infinitely more signal that Meta has. So someone making an assertion that they would know more, I would be very hesitant around that idea. Then outside of that, I think there's something outside of that. That's all I want to say.
Cool. So what about the situation then outside the age demographic piece where it at least appears on the surface like Meta is blowing bad spend on an ad that's underperforming? And let's say in the scenario you have your cost caps are set correctly, your cost controls are set correctly rather. You have the kind of like everything is set up properly according to best practices on the front end, but it feels like Meta is just pushing spend to the wrong thing. How do you investigate, I guess?
Yes. So this is actually the other thing I wanted to say, which is the time frame against which the results are assessed is really important as well. And typically we all have a high time preference, which means we like to look at things. It's easier for us to assess things in a shorter time window. And when it comes to campaign performance, whether it be the age demographic or a specific individual ad performance, it's really hard to assess over a longer period of time how the efficiency of that is going to actually play out. We were just talking about this a few weeks ago. Like, we wish that 28-day click optimization was still around for Meta, because that's what Google is optimizing against, is typically 31.1 or 37.1, and there's a meaningful increase in the value captured over a longer period of time. And we see this with post-treatment windows on incrementality tests, which is if you extend your post-treatment window 30 days or even 60 days, you start to see a really different result on what the true incremental impact was of the channel over a longer period of time. That's why, back to the main point, the platform has infinitely more signal than we do. And being able to assess over a long period of time with a clear-eyed view is not something that we're good at. And the platform is going to be more effective in going about that exercise. An anecdote is, in the case where you see an ad that's getting a large majority of the spend and the efficiency appears to be low, most of us have done this at some point in our lives, even if we don't like to admit it, which is if you were to turn off that ad, spend would start to flow to the other ads. And then the next day you'd refresh and that ad would be higher efficiency than all the other ads in the account. And those would start to be performing at that lower ROAS, because the level of volume and degradation associated with it was just so wildly disparate. And then you end up turning that ad back on in a day or two, because it's like, oh, wait a second. After even just a day or two of realizing some of the incremental value, this was by far the top performing ad relative to the others in the account.
Yeah. Tony, that's the face of a man with a hot take brewing.
So let's just pretend that we're talking about like a relatively small investment, like $5,000, maybe $10,000 a month. You're honestly probably better off setting the budget, getting everything set up correctly in the account, and closing your computer and going and doing something else. You're almost certainly causing more harm than good in your ultimate pursuit, let me be clear. Your ultimate pursuit is, if you're spending $10,000 this month, 6 months from now to be spending $15,000 or $20,000 a month. That's your ultimate pursuit, to be deploying more investment. So you are almost certainly doing yourself more harm than good by chasing some fool's gold of efficiency in the short term. Yeah. Close your computer, go outside, touch grass.
Or make more creative, or do a creative marketing moment, or
Sure. Well, I like touch grass as the hot take of the day for this. And that connects directly with what Luke was saying about like your perception that the ad is not performing or is underperforming or whatever the case may be is from your limited human point of view, and there's probably something else going on, something broader. Is that fair to say, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say. I also think like all of this is wrapped in what your expectation is, right? So I mean, again, we use the example of you're a smaller brand, you're a new advertiser. Like if your expectation is that you're going to put $3, $1 in the meta machine and it's going to give you $3 or $4 out, like your expectation is wrong, especially at that early stage. So if your expectation was, let's just pretend I have a business, I'm going to invest as much capital as I possibly can in I'm going to invest as much capital as I possibly can in creating creative stories. Okay. I'm going to take the remaining capital that I have and I'm going to put it in the meta machine, and I'm going to try to increase that investment over time in a scalable way. And I'm not going to screw around with tactics. You're going to be a lot further along in 12 to 18 months than tinkering with bid modifiers, multipliers.
Makes sense. Okay, let's jump to another question here, which is, hey everyone, I just wanted to take a few seconds here to talk to you about Admission, our membership program here at CTC that gives you access to one-on-one consultations with our growth experts, as well as weekly live events and access to our gated library of e-commerce trainings. This is the best way to work with us here at Common Thread Collective if you're in the 6 to 7 figure range. Now, to get started, all you have to do is book a call with me to talk more about it at youradmission.co. That's youradmission.co. All right, back to the show. How do you approach media buying for a subscription business? So this is a business, let's say, that has a relatively low AOV, but if you can capture the subscription, LTV becomes higher over time. So what are our basics of approaching that sort of scenario where first order profitability is maybe not an option, or break even is probably the goal?
All right, so I got a couple, and then this is going to be Luke's jam right here. All right. Number one, obvious, you have to understand your LTV. The reason why, number two, is you're in an auction, you're competing with other advertisers who do understand their LTV, and so the advertisers in the space of subscriptions that have it figured out are hyper aggressive, pushing well below first order profit. So good deep understanding of LTV puts you in a place where you can actually be competitive. The other thing that we're seeing and exploring is, optimizing for subscription at the event level. So doing some things on the pixel that are like specific around hunting for these types of customers that are more likely to be subscription as opposed to single purchasers.
Yeah, so step one is to figure out how aggressive you can be in your new customer acquisition. Because to Tony's point, having high LTV gives you a leg up and being able to be more aggressive and take more market share and grow your customer base. But step one is understanding what are the monthly fixed costs that you have to have money for that in that individual month to cover those obligations. And step two, understand how much contribution margin you are going to get from your returning customer base in the coming months, and looking at the delta that exists between the two. If I have OPEX of $250,000 and I have returning customer revenue of $500,000 at a gross margin of 50%, then my marginal value of my returning customer contribution margin is going to exactly cover my fixed cost. So it's basically netting out at zero. I'm going to be able to cover the expenses in that way. Now that gives me an idea of how aggressive I can be on new customer acquisition, which is I have to be break even on first order or better, right? Because I have enough contribution margin from returning customers to account for my obligations this month, but I don't have any buffer. 250,000. I have to be break even or better on first time customer contribution margin. Now, if you have $1 million in revenue from your returning customer cohort and $500,000 in marginal value against your 250K OPEX, now you have $250,000 of margin from your returning customers that you can use to float negative first-time customer acquisition. Now you understand how much room you have to play with and how aggressive you can be in that game, while also understanding your cash flow considerations, which is another piece. But we'll just kind of leave that aside for now. So once you do those steps, Now we know how aggressive we can be on new customer acquisition, whether we have to make money, whether we can break even, or how much money we can lose. Then the final step is being able to model out through something like the spend AMR model, which is why we created that CTC, because it's critical to understand what is the new customer revenue, new customer order count, and first-time customer contribution margin I'm going to get at differing spend levels. And with something like the spend AMR model, what it's able to show us is, okay, if I'm willing to lose $250,000 on my first-time customer contribution margin, this is how much I should plan to spend, and this is going to be the likely output. That's the high-level budget setting. Then breaking that down on an individual unit level is you need to understand, to Tony's points, the LTV related to each of the core products or the product categories, as well as the marginal value differences between each one of those, and use that to set what the return rate should be on each of the funnels. So likely if you have 5 products, each of them have a different LTV over 60, 90, 120, and 180, 1 year, ... LTV window. So understand the LTV percent increase for each of those product categories separately, as well as the marginal value differences between the two. Product A has a 50% gross margin, but product B has a 63% gross margin, right? Then after taking into account the marginal value and the LTV, then you can back into what the ROAS target needs to be for each one of those to be at break even, or to be at or to be more aggressive if you're able to be. And you'll end up with individual ROAS targets for each of those funnels, where I can operate at a 1.2 for product A, but I can operate at a 1.05 for product B because the marginal value is better. And then product C, I can be at a 0.93 because the LTV percent increase is better than all of them combined. And then those are the targets that get set. Adjust those targets for incrementality. That's what gets set across Meta, Google, all the other platforms in terms of what the ROAS target should be. Push as much volume as possible against those within the constraints of the contribution margin you need to be able to cover your fixed obligations for that month.
We should just call this podcast Unit Economics 101.
Yeah, seriously. I feel like we could call all CTC's content that at some level. Basically all it is.
We've seen some pretty big differences in LTV at the product level, like pretty big swings in what drives products that drive LTV versus products that don't. Like, and so to Luke's point about the unit economics, like up from top to bottom, like that's going to have a big impact.
Yeah. And yeah, I think we could keep going down this lane. So we worked with a number of brands that have very large catalogs in terms of the various products that they sell, and the average order values being everywhere from $10 to $1,000 within the same brand. And then the marginal value against those being very different. We're in the process with one right now it's millions of SKUs that span the range of like that range, $10 to $2,000. And then the marginal value is different because the suppliers and the licensing associated with it, the different artists that they're working with is different on each of the products. So for brands that have really large product catalogs like that, you have to make a really strong case for running cost cap, bid cap campaigns or target CPA campaigns. It should all be target ROAS or min ROAS, because there's way too much complexity in the product catalog. If you go conversion highest volume or cost cap, bid cap based, you're just going to index towards the lower AOV items, and you're going to leave volume on the table. And then the second challenge is being able to understand the marginal value buckets. You can't, if you have a million SKUs, running a million separate campaigns on Meta and Google probably isn't the way to go. But you also can't run one, because each of them have different margin associated with the product costs and the delivery costs associated with a piece of art versus furniture, for example. So bucketing marginal value to look at, okay, for products that live in these 2 or 3 categories, the marginal value related to COGS and cost of delivery is really similar. Great, we can run those in one campaign. This is the ROAS target associated. Okay, here's the next one, and get it to maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20 campaigns that have sort of buckets of what the marginal value is and separate ROAS targets each, and then each of the products flow into those categories accordingly.
Yeah, I was going to say, so my next question was actually literally, we have a massive product catalog with tons of SKUs. How do you approach cost controls when it's difficult to determine expected AOV? So let's do that. I want to hear your take on that too, Tony.
Yeah, I was just sort of like reflecting as Luke was talking about, like, we get so many questions about media tactics, but then we come in here and we talk about like pretty much like all the things that happened before that, like understanding the unit economics of what you're selling. So it's the same. Luke already pretty much gave the answer. Like
Yeah.
we're grouping around AOVs, we're grouping around marginal profile. I think there's a tension that exists between with the desire to group and consolidate as much as possible versus the necessity to separate out based on marginal profile, based on AOV, based on LTV. So there's always going to be some tension between these two things. I think to Luke's point around min ROAS or T ROAS bidding versus cost cap or TCPA, we really favor ROAS-based bidding for catalog ad products as opposed to TCPA because of the variance in AOV. But that's not to say like throw your whole catalog in a DPA or a shopping campaign and set the bid. Like it's not that either. I think on the horizon, both of the big two media platforms are pushing towards bid for profit. We've participated in Google Pilot, and we've got some stuff going on with Meta as well, which I think represents a bidding strategy that, potentially could put us in a situation where we're like, yeah, throw everything in big DPA or throw everything in a big shopping campaign, but we're not there yet. So yeah, what's the hot take? That was just a lot of words. Find group your DPAs based on a combination of AOV and margin.
Yeah.
Make as few groups as possible while also accounting for those differences.
Yeah.
And the thing I would add is that we're also talking like ideal workflow, which is if you really do have a million SKUs, you have to start somewhere. So start identifying the SKUs that drive 80% of your revenue, which is not going to be 80% of your SKUs. It's going to be 10% of your SKUs, 20% maybe. So identify the SKUs or the product categories that drive the majority of your revenue outcome, and then go after those. Start to bucket each one of those and go down the line, and that'll focus the energy in a place where the output is focused on the majority of where the revenue is being driven versus daily working through the whole catalog.
Yeah, so I want to double down on this because we've encountered this a bunch of times in big SKU businesses where we end up advertising a much smaller set of the products that are available in the SKU. So 50%, 30%, 20%. We focus on products that we're able to create volume with and capture volume with. So I think one of the answers to this question is consider cutting half the SKUs out of your feed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. No, I feel like there's two good, let's say hot-ish takes here, which is, or rather, maybe I'll just say like the sort of
lukewarm
lukewarm
takes.
I'm not going to say lukewarm. I think they're the perfect temperature. But number one being, yeah, sell fewer things, which I think can sometimes be counterintuitive to people. Then the other thing that's like maybe mildly counterintuitive is like the idea that you're essentially merchandising your ad account, which we talked about before, by AOV rather than by like product category or type, which I feel like is where people's brains go automatically. Because if you would think about like you walked into, I don't know, Ross Dress for Less, maybe that's not a great example because they only sell clothes, but like let's say you go to Kohl's or whatever, and each section of the store is like, these are all the things that cost $50. These are all the things that cost $100. That would be a weird shopping experience. But in the case of the ad account, like you have to consider grouping things in a different way in order to get the outcome that.
Well, retail stores do this though, like grocery stores. But they do it at height level. So all the important high margin products are at eye level. All the generic stuff is down here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Of like, yeah, within the category at least, there's some level of like AOV sorting, I guess. But.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to caveat too. I didn't say sell less things. I said advertise less things. So as soon as you're going to start to advertise something, then with paid media dollars, then you have to absorb a CAC. So,
right.
Yeah, another worthwhile point on this topic. So we've worked hard over the recent months to create a product matrix report on top of our data set that lives in Statless. And the whole idea of the product matrix report is that it highlights what your MVP product, individual products or product categories are. MVP being the intersection of the marginal value associated with each of those products, the volume associated with each of those products, and then the potential for additional upside opportunity relative to where they sit in the context of your broader catalog. And so what we've done is we've taken the product level and category level revenue data, not difficult, but then we've matched that back against the ad spend from each of the channels against those products in the product categories. This is the most challenging part because every brand has a really unique structure in terms of URLs on the website, their product naming, the ad account structures. It's really challenging to match spend data back to a product or product category level. And so we do that in a couple different ways using a logic set and then AI as well to sort through URL structures, as well as ad naming conventions and campaign naming conventions, the ad account, as well as copy that's presented on each of the ads. So we take these data sources to help match in the best way possible, spend back to the product category level and the individual product level. And it's really fascinating because it starts to highlight products or product categories that are driving the majority of the sales, but are underserved or underrepresented in the opportunity relative to either their volume or their marginal upside. And then it does the inverse as well and starts to show product categories that have real marginal strength, but are just being underinvested in compared to the higher sales volume product. So this is ultimately what you want, is to be able to look at a report like that is able to match the opportunities that exist within your product category revenue contribution against the spend allocated against each to identify where you're over underserving the opportunity.
No, I feel like, this has turned into a little bit of an ad for good reason, I think, for our proprietary software, Statless, which is part of making these smart decisions about these things requires pulling these specific like data sets that you're mentioning, Luke, and Statless can help.
We just build the things we need. That's all.
Yes.
It's really simple.
Yeah. So whatever you need, it's in there. Okay, let's so we got two more that we can go to. Both of these being a little bit on the curveball side. So first, I'm going to ask this question, which is, what personality trait would you look for in a great media buyer? What are the characteristics of somebody who's actually good at this?
They have design skills.
Oh, interesting.
They can
unpack that.
They can. So the heart of that comment comes from the conversation earlier, which is what we don't want is someone tinkering with budgets and bids all day. What we want is to set the target associated with each of the campaign. I'm not going to say the whole thing again. The whole thing we've just talked about. That's what we want in the initial strategy, and then to inflate the budgets against those outcomes and let the platforms dictate where the volume is going to come from. Then the effort should go into what are the new campaigns and creatives that we can launch and add into the ad account. That's where incremental value is going to come from. So how do we create additional creative volume in a diverse way of creative formats? What are the products or categories that we're underserving and we don't have any ads in the account for that we should create some ads around? It is identifying how we can add incremental value in the form of additional creative and campaigns to the account that live at the intersection of these MVP products and our marketing calendar moments. That is where the thought work and the time should go into relentlessly. And then whether that person is a designer themselves or is really good at using CapCut or really good at using icon.me or really good at using Canva or has outsourced design resource that's able to help them execute is sort of besides the point. But the core point being that they make more ads and add them to the ad account that sit at the intersection of MVP products and marketing moments.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tony?
I mean, I think curiosity is a trait that makes digital marketing people excel in the profession. Sort of trying to hunt for cause and effect, knowing that our pursuit is to produce positive contribution margin dollars, intimately understanding that our mission in media is to deploy more media dollars to invest capital on behalf of our partners successfully more. The pathways to get there they're not unlimited, but there are a bunch. And I think you'll hear us talk more and more about how those pathways are not in, tinkering of small knobs, but in taking big shots on goal. There are tactical things that I think are worth exploring. Meta's got this incremental attribution product, which we're like pushing into, because if it helps us deploy more media dollars more effectively, protects contribution margin as we go, we're into it. So yeah, curiosity in general, and I guess being sort of willing and able to, to be wrong a lot, to have a theory and say, hey, that didn't sort of go the way that we hoped, and to correct quickly. And I think the inverse. Well, let me describe what I think doesn't work. Not trying, not taking big swings, like defaulting to only the framework or only like the sort of checking boxes. Like I think that is, doesn't really dig into the spirit of what it is that we're trying to do, which what we're seeking to do is invest capital on behalf of our partners and create a return with that capital. We're investors, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like one thing that kind of ties what you both are saying together is like what you're looking for is a strategically minded person who has the confidence to execute on big picture out of the box ideas, which maybe is like the description for what makes anybody successful in any field. I don't know. But I think particularly in media buying, there's certainly a stereotype of, a few years ago at least, that it's the media buyer is sort of somebody who's just like playing a bunch of slot machines at the same time, or like a day trader or something like that, who's just there to kind of like look for these tiny arbitrage moments, pull some levers, whatever. But that's just sort of not the case anymore. And it sounds like how you're framing it, Luke, is that the job of the media buyer is basically to be a creative strategist, like to be thinking about creative opportunity constantly, whether it's from the perspective of like, oh, this product's being underserved, or we need more creative about this product because it's performing really well, or whatever the case may be. And if they have the ability to execute on it, that's even better.
It's just impossible to decouple these things.
Yeah.
Like it's impossible to decouple media buying from creative strategy, from growth strategy, from product.
Yeah.
They're all part of an ecosystem that is the brand.
Yeah. Makes sense. Luke, any final thoughts?
No, I completely agree with what Tony said last, which is we see these things becoming one thing. And that's the trajectory that our system is built around and our folks are built around, which is like sort of the more nuanced way of saying their designer comment that I said earlier, which is that they are the highest level head of growth that is able to affect every single channel and see the creative output and affect that similarly, which is you need to understand the whole business. You need to be a growth strategist that's able to actually go all the way down to launching net new campaigns on Meta, net new campaigns on Google, and that tie up to the business objective. These things are cascading into the same thing. So that is the trajectory that we see and where the opportunity lies for businesses and for individuals looking to make the most impact themselves in terms of their growth.
Cool. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for us for today. Now, I did mention that I had one more curveball question. We're going to save that for next week, so you'll have to tune in next time to hear it. Throw in a
cliffhanger.
Exactly. Yeah. There's drama in the DTC hotline. Okay, so just a quick note: if you want your questions answered on this pod, please call us and leave us a voicemail at 866-DTC-2263, or send us a text there. You don't have to. We're not going to play your voice on the podcast if you don't want us to. You can just send us to us via text, and then I can read it off and we can answer your questions as well. But yeah, send us there. We might read your question on subsequent episodes. So for Tony, the Chopper Chop, and for Luke, the Weatherman Austin, I'm your host, Richard, the Professor Gaffin. Thanks for listening to the DTC Hotline, and we will talk to you again next time. See ya.